From almost ripping Tony Ferguson's leg off, to being dubbed as Granite Chin by Brendan Schaub, here's why Charles Oliveira will be destroyed by Beneil Dariush. For starters, he is proof that you don't need to be a Dagestani to be a wrestling god. At UFC 280, Charles Oliveira got a taste of his own medicine and tapped out to a vicious chokehold, courtesy of Khabib's pupil. All it took was some classic grappling to erase his terrifying unbeaten runoff. There is only one man who works the ground as good, if not better, as Islam Makhachev. It's Big Benny himself. For all those willing to debate, come back after watching Beneil's masterful submission of Anthony Rocco Martin. The sequences began from the middle of the octagon, where Dariush thought, yeah, I'm bored, let's seal up the fight. The Iranian broke down Martin, mounting him over with a terrifying vice. It wasn't the fact that he made him tap, but how easy it was for him to lure Rocco down to deep waters. Now that is something you can only see from a world-class Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu connoisseur. What if I told you that Beneil is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu champion without a gi? Oh, and let's not forget the time he broke Tony Ferguson's ankle. Somebody tell Beneil that it is El Cucuy right there. But bet Benny is only going to flash his charming smile at you like it was nothing special. He isn't afraid of wrestling it out with Oliveira's kryptonite, Islam Makhachev. Speaking to RT Sport, Dariush vented on the speculation of him competing against the Dagestani. And make no mistake, Benny isn't afraid to take the fight to the ground. So what if Islam is a grappler? Benny made it very clear that being a grappler is very high on his resume. I guess Oliveira thought postponing the fight was better than another tap out. But if he thinks he can offset Beneil's grappling, he's got another thing coming. Beneil Dariush isn't just a great grappler, but he is one of the most potent strikers the UFC has seen. That's just a fact. I think we all remember that comeback against Drakkar Klose. You know, the one that sparked all the Joe Rogan memes. Drakkar had the Iranians back against the cage, going ham with those lefts and rights. Now that is an image Oliveira will definitely try to recreate. It looked as though Dariush was going to go lights out, when he simply decided to go into beast mode. He came back at the American with some gangster shots. Joe Rogan was screaming like a madman. The crowd was losing it. And Drakkar? He certainly didn't look as tough anymore. That was the prime example of why you should never underestimate Benny. UFC veteran Paul Felder certainly isn't one of them. Speaking on the fighter versus the writer, he said that Beneil has all the goods to knock out a guy like Charles Oliveira. But what's more interesting is how he thinks Beneil has a better chance of dismantling the Brazilian than Makhachev himself. Now that says a lot, considering how easily the Dagestanian humbled him up. Oliveira is a grappler himself, so if Dariush takes the fight to the ground, he may have a reply. But when it comes to a straight-out Kimbo slice-style brawl, yeah, Benny is going in for the kill. And yes, his legs can dish out a beating too. Is there anything this man is bad at? Even if you think you have Dariush all figured out, he'll come up with another Benny from the hat with his crazy fighter IQ. When you take a look at the guy laying down some BJJ gems for other fighters, you'll realize the secret behind his grappling game. Cue the viral clip of him teaching students how to destroy opponents at the UFC gym in Huntington Beach. The way he talks about wrestling just screams experience, which is another reason why he is such a genius in the octagon. Dariush has been wreaking havoc in the UFC since 2014 and has been dwelling in the jiu-jitsu world since 2007. His first ever BJJ coach was veteran Bruno Mamute Paulista, a man who was a meek pupil of South Brazil's top competitors, Master Dioclésio Paulo and Alexandre de Souza. These names gave Beneil everything he needed to know to be the top dog in the fight game. And now, the devout Christian is doing God's work, imparting his fighter IQ to other upcoming fighters with his online courses. You see, Charles Oliveira is one of the most aggressive fighters you'll ever come across. However, it's his aggression that may lead to his undoing. Postponing the fight further may just backfire for Charles, since it has only given Dariush time to make up a better game plan to take him out. If I was Bronx right now, I'd be replaying Benny's unreal counter-submission of Darren Cruikshank over and over, trying to figure out how on earth he countered the Detroit superstar's ankle grapple into a rear-naked chokehold. But more than sheer fighter IQ, it will be a battle of mindsets heading into the fight. And there is no question that Dariush has the upper hand there too. In one corner, we have Charles Oliveira, a man who was known as the scariest fighter in the division. Emphasis on the word was, please. Ever since Islam Makhachev dissected him at UFC 280, the world saw that he was, in fact, human after all. Oliveira was so flabbergasted by the loss that he completely dismissed an exciting fight proposition against Rafael Fiziev and announced that he needed a break. If Charles was anything as gangster as he was marketing himself out to be, he should have kept up the momentum and made an example out of the Azerbaijani mauler. It's clear Oliveira was low on confidence and self-esteem. Maybe he's dealing with some underlying issues that we will get back to later. As for Beneil, Charles is nothing more than a stepping stone for him to get that title shot. The MMA world has been rooting for Dariush in this fight because, frankly, he deserves it the most. The Iranian will be heading hot into the octagon with nothing but confidence and the sheer desire to win. He's boasting a killer 8-fight win streak. And heading into UFC 288, he almost made it a solid 9. That is, until Charles backed out due to a suspiciously undisclosed injury. Beneil's reaction? Let's just say the Dariush household almost lost a table. Some speculated that the injury was nothing more than a tactic for Oliveira to buy time. Or even if he is injured, rest assured, Dariush will be doing all he can to find that chink in the Brazilian's armor and make him suffer for it. If there is one thing Dariush has that other fighters don't, it's some ridiculous stamina. Seriously, the man will be wobbling, looking like he needs some Kool-Aid, only to come back with a flurry of shots, looking like nothing even happened. And considering the bout is set up for 5 rounds, you bet this is going to be some cardio on the treadmill for the Iranian. Speaking to ESPN MMA, he laid out his game plan for the 5-round fight. Beneil said he didn't know how else to prepare for a 15-minute knock. He knows that whoever outlives the other wins. Beneil then had the audacity to say that he could have pumped out 3 rounds more after his slugfest against Mateos Gamrot at UFC 280. Oliveira has yet to show that level of conditioning in his fights. But the problem might just be a little bit bigger here. You see, before being known as the worst mother trucker in the UFC, Oliveira was known as the Q word. I think it's time we talk about the issues I mentioned earlier. There's something off about the Brazilian, which is something even Justin Gaethje pointed out before his fight with him. When confronted with some heavy shots, Charles has the tendency to fold and call it quits. No, I'm not just talking about the time he was left paralyzed for 4 hours following an esophagus rupture against Max Holloway. Let's roll the Cub Swanson fight back, where Oliveira fell to a shot that Beneil Dariush would eat for breakfast with a side of pancakes. Glass chin, maybe? Meanwhile, Brandon Schaub thinks the Iranian's chin is made of granite. And considering the power Dariush brings to the table, I wouldn't blame him for settling for the Q word. Charles has addressed this label multiple times, openly challenging anyone to try him and see if he quits. And, oh, Benny doesn't need an invitation for that. He's called out Oliveira for his lack of confidence and doesn't even think he'll show up. But when he does, you know Big Benny will be ready. So, from being dubbed as Granite Chin by a UFC veteran to almost ripping Tony Ferguson's leg off, that's why Charles Oliveira will be destroyed by Beneil Dariush.